I really need more creative ways to introduce my videos. Hi everyone! It's the end of September, which means that fall is here, which is very exciting. Fall is hands down my favorite time of year in New England, and we're approaching the end of block 4 of my 3rd year, which means it's time for me to reflect on another rotation gone by. Block 4 for me was primary care, which consists of 6 weeks in an outpatient setting with one physician who served as my preceptor and mentor for the length of the block. I went into this block very interested in primary care, so I have a lot of things to say about it. First, let's get this out of the way. Compared to surgery and internal medicine, the hours are so much nicer. I've mentioned this in multiple videos before, and I didn't realize quite how much I missed having 2 days off in a row until Labor Day weekend. I'd been so used to having 1 day off per week in my previous 2 rotations that even having 2 days off was a little bit of a stretch. So when it got to the 3rd day, I had no idea what to do. As the weeks went on, I got used to having 2 days off per week and was able to plan time for studying and productivity and also for relaxation, which is really nice after the stress of the last 3 months. Now for the actual substance of the primary care rotation. I'm going to start out with some of the things that I actually didn't like about the rotation, and then I'll get to some of the things that I did. I think the main difference between inpatient and outpatient care that I really noticed was the change in the amount of time that you can spend with each patient. When it comes to inpatient care, in the morning you're not spending that much time with each patient because you're rounding and you have to get through all your patients. But in the afternoon you have time to go back to any patients, clarify things, follow up on tests, and do other responsibilities that you may not have been able to do in the space of the morning. By contrast, in outpatient settings, you're limited by the length of your appointment. You have to cover all of your concerns and all of your patients' concerns in that 20-minute visit. And if you run out of time, you run out of time, and you may have to tell the patient, hey, I can't cover everything that we wanted to get through today, but we're going to have to schedule another appointment to follow up on that. Additionally, and this is not something that necessarily doesn't exist in inpatient care, it's just a little bit different, you have to navigate a lot of difficult interpersonal situations when it comes to outpatient care as well. For example, dealing with patients who have difficulty getting to appointments because of transportation or time limitations, confronting interpersonal violence, substance abuse. One of the classic patients that comes to mind when you think about situations like this is the patient who struggles with chronic pain. How do you manage a patient's pain when they keep coming back, nothing seems to be working for them? How do you deal with that? There's a lot of diplomacy and skill that you have to learn and develop when you're navigating difficult interpersonal situations like those. Most of the problems I mentioned are not unique to primary care, but I think especially compared to the inpatient rotations I was just in, those problems were highlighted for me in this rotation. Thankfully, the negative aspects for me were vastly outweighed by the huge list of positives that I noticed from my rotation experience. I'm a firm believer in many of the foundational principles of primary care, and I saw those principles reinforced again and again throughout my time in this rotation. For example, continuity of care. Even during my short 6-week rotation, I had multiple instances where I got to see a patient twice, either because they were scheduled for a 2-week follow-up or because they came in for a chronic issue and then they came in later for an acute issue. Even though I had only seen these patients once before, it was amazing how much I remembered from the last time they'd been there, and I think I got to build so much more of a rapport and a relationship with them because they'd seen me before and they knew who I was. One of the ways that family medicine in particular encourages continuity of care is that one doctor often gets to take care of multiple generations. My preceptor has a couple of families where he takes care of the grandma, the mom, the daughter, and the granddaughter. Another principle of primary care that really resonates with me is the importance of preventive care and the kind of visits where a patient isn't necessarily presenting with a problem, but you want to guide them and advise them on how they can prevent diseases from happening in the first place. Another part of family medicine specifically that I really like is the emphasis on psychosocial issues. Medicine is always practiced in context. Family medicine's philosophy really seeks to include that context when we're looking at patients. My preceptor was always taking into account factors such as a patient's ability to access medications, different services that they could or couldn't receive because of their insurance, family dynamics and how that affected patients' access and ability to care for themselves, all sorts of things. I really like having that context in mind every time I see a patient. Another thing, in primary care, as with any other part of medicine, There are always guidelines and recommendations about different parts of medicine. And again, it was interesting to see when those guidelines were deviated from because of a patient's particular circumstances. I like having a well-rounded base of knowledge, and I also like having the flexibility and adaptability to deal with whatever gets thrown my way. I think primary care and family medicine in particular really appeals to that side of me because it really is an exercise in adaptability. I could have a 5-year-old coming in for a well visit where they're perfectly healthy, and all I have to do is tell the parent what kinds of things to expect as the child gets older and how they can prevent things from happening. Then 20 minutes later, I walk into another room to see an 85-year-old patient who's just come out of the hospital for this or that issue, and they have 12 different medications for 6 different medical problems, and I have to make sure that none of their medications are interacting, that they're not having side effects, that they're able to get around and do their usual activities, that they have the right help for those activities. It really takes a lot of mental flexibility to be able to tackle each patient's problems with new eyes. I really like developing that skill, and I think this rotation allowed me to be a little better at doing that. Finally, and maybe this is just from my particular preceptor or my particular site, I got to learn a good amount about billing and the business and financial sides of medicine, which I feel like we don't get to learn a lot about during med school. My preceptor is very knowledgeable about business and finance and advocacy and the legal and insurance complicatedness of the field of medicine. So I got to kind of pick his brain a little bit on those issues and learn about the broader context that physicians have to practice in these days. Regardless of what field of medicine I end up going into, I think those are very important things to learn, and I hope I can find ways to keep learning about them as I progress through my rotations and into 4th year. In sum, I came into this rotation pretty excited and hoping to learn a lot, and I really have learned a lot. I don't know if it's narrowed down anything for me yet, but I know that primary care is still definitely on my radar. As I go into my next rotation, which is pediatrics, I hope I can further learn about both outpatient and inpatient medicine, at least to some degree, and by doing so, narrow down my choices a little bit more. I'm still really interested in primary care, and we'll see how that interest progresses in the months to come. My next video is going to be interesting because I'll only be about halfway through my rotation by the end of the month, so I can't really make any conclusive judgments about the pediatrics rotation until November. So we'll see what I make my video about next month. But for now, I'm past the halfway point of 3rd year, which I still can't believe, and we're heading into fall. See you in the next video.